don't live in a place where we can sled right outside our door, but we did take the kids out a few days ago and to a park with a hill, and some hills we decided were safe and some we decided were not. But we had a lot of fun sledding and making snow angels and trying to have a snowball fight. This snow was not as quite as wet as we've had in the past, so we mostly stuck to sledding and and snow angels. But it was fun, and we did want to, like I said, we chose some hills and not others, partially because I have a friend in seminary who a few years ago went out with some of the teenagers when it snowed. And Northern Virginia can be a hilly place, a little bit like Kansas City. And they found a pretty steep hill that was fun to sled really fast down. But this friend of mine came back from his sledding adventure with a broken leg. So it doesn't sound dangerous, but it can definitely be dangerous. And it took him 4 or 5 months for his leg to heal. Wasn't going to let that be me. Wasn't going to let that be Asher and Anya. So we played it safe, and we're all fine. But I'm also reminded of another story about some misadventures in the snow, and that was when there was a blizzard. And that isn't anybody that I know, but I did hear the story told to me of a woman driving home from work or from shopping, I can't remember, in a whiteout blizzard. And of course, whiteout is that term for when the snow is so thick and the wind is so strong, you really can't see anything at all in front of you, and you're completely blinded. So this woman was trying to drive home and couldn't see anything until suddenly she came up on some taillights in front of her, and she realized this is a truck. She got a little closer and she realized this is a snowplow. So this is somebody I can probably follow. And he'll know where he's going. He can get me there, at least somewhere where I can have some light and I can figure out where to go. So she followed this snowplow for maybe an hour, trying to have patience, knowing that everything is slow going. Eventually, I get to somewhere I can recognize and can go from there. And it was after that hour or so when the snowplow stopped, and the driver got out and walked back, braved the snow and the wind, and came to the lady, and she managed to roll down her window, and he said, "Hey lady, what are you following me for?" She said, "Well, I can't see anything. I'm just trying to get home." He said, "Lady, I'm snowing this parking lot. I'm plowing this parking lot. You're following me in circles." And so much to her chagrin, she realized her choice of somebody to follow, her choice of a leader, was not the best. She had spent an hour driving around a parking lot in circles. My uncle told that joke much better than I did, but I think it's a true story. And I was reminded of that by the weather. I was also reminded of that by the gospel that we just read, of Jesus saying, "Follow me," like he so often does in the gospel stories. And that's a reminder to me that we are all following somebody. You might know a person who they say marches to the beat of his own drummer, or makes her own rules, or any of those sayings, but I don't know that anybody really does that. I don't think anybody actually marches to the beat of their own drummer. Nobody makes up their own rules. We are truly all following someone. We are all following something. And the question is just, who is that? What is that? And when we look at ourselves here in this Facebook Live event, when we look around while we're at church and we wonder why we're doing this, what's the deal with all of the words in this book, why are we not still in bed, why are we not cozied up by a fire watching a movie, what are we doing? What is the point of this? And it's a harsh truth sometimes. The more we see society moving away from a religious worldview, the more we bear the burden of proof, the more we have to explain why it is we do this. And I feel like I've had this conversation a few times in the last week. Our parents and our grandparents did not have to make a case for being in church or for being religious or for following a faith tradition. In fact, they would have to make a case for not doing that. If it's Sunday morning, 10:30, and they're not in church, they would have to explain why not. But you and me, We might find ourselves talking to friends who are not in church, and if we say it's 10:30, I'm going to church, or 10 o'clock, I'm going to church, we might have to explain why. It's no longer assumed. It's no longer the default. The burden of proof is now on us. Because we put a lot of time and money and effort into having a church, into being a church, and some of the things we do might start to seem a little silly until we remember that everyone is following someone. Everyone is worshiping something. And we can either do it blindly, like the woman following the snowplow around the parking lot, or we can be intentional about who we're following. And that intentionality is not always easy. It doesn't matter whether you are trying to get in shape and lose weight, or trying to eat healthier, or trying to improve and expand your mind, or get a new degree or a new career, or learn a new hobby. All of those things require intentionality, which means it's not our default. It's not the thing we're going to do automatically. It's not a thing that we're going to fall back into out of habit. We have to be intentional about it. And until we look at our own lives and we recognize that we are following someone or something by default. Usually it's what our friends do. The people we admire, whatever they follow, we might tend to follow by default, because that's easier to do. It's easier to go along to get along, right? To feel like we fit in and be part of a crowd. We don't have to do so much thinking for ourselves. That's our default. And we follow what society tells us to do. And that may mean we get the job that earns the most money. That may mean we buy the things, we buy the phones, we buy the TVs, we buy the cars that everybody else is buying. We dress in ways that we see other people dressing so that we can fit in. These are our defaults. These are who we are following naturally. But you don't have to be religious to notice that that may not always be good. It may not always be good to engage in the activities that we see happening around us, to drink what our friends are drinking. Because we see the results of that sometimes. We see what comes of it, and we don't want to end up there, but we don't know how to do it unless we intentionally choose to follow something or someone else. And just like it was our friends, it's our peers that create that default for us of where we tend to go without trying or without meaning to. It takes peers, it takes community to be intentional about making a different choice. And that's what I believe we're doing here. And that's partially why we love so much to be in person, because we need that support. And we can feel that support amongst one another here in this Facebook event. We know that we are here for each other. But then we look forward to gathering again next week when we can exchange hugs and handshakes and conversations. To know that we're doing something a little silly, a little nonsensical, but that's what needs to be done in order to break that habit, to break that default that we always come back into without each other's help. We're always on the edge of slipping back into that habit unless we're supporting each other to do something different. Unless we're supporting each other, remember, like what the psalmist says, that I was made, that God knew me before I was born. That I am beautifully and I'm wonderfully made, instead of that old thinking, that habitual thinking that there's something wrong with me. I'm not enough. I need to fix myself. No, I am wonderfully made. You are wonderfully made. And we forget that unless we support each other to remember. And I can remind you how wonderfully you are made. And you can remind me how wonderfully I'm made. And we can take those words to heart. We tend to fall back into those habits and those defaults unless we're like Eli telling Samuel, oh, you're hearing from God right now. Go back and tell God, here I am. Speak, your servant is listening. He couldn't do that on his own. And then when he got that message, which is the part we didn't read, He got a message that Samuel needed to hear, or that Eli needed to hear, and he couldn't get it on his own. He needed Samuel to hear that for him. If we're going to be intentional about following something good, in this case, the someone who is the most good, Jesus, it requires breaking out of our old habits. And that requires trusting each other, supporting each other. So that each time we come to church, each time we log into a Facebook live stream, or whatever it may be, we can join together with one voice and we can say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Amen.